What if I told you there's one synthesizer that's responsible for revolutionising the way music sounds today? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that synthesizer is the Yamaha DX7. Now, I've only had the privilege of playing one of these babies once when I was 14, and ever since then, it has not left my mind. And for the past 17 years, it has been my mission in life that one day, I will own one. Not only do I love this thing because of the way that it sounds, but because of its place in history. The Yamaha DX7 was released in 1983 and manufactured until 1989 and is one of the best-selling synthesizers in history, selling more than 200,000 units. The DX7's distinct sound has been used in countless hit songs across different genres, and its iconic electric piano sound, known as the DX7 Rhodes, can be heard in classics like Whitney Houston's I Wanna Dance With Somebody, a-ha's Take On Me, Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, and many, many more. So the DX7 has sold a few 100,000 units and has been used in a few hit songs. What makes it so special? I'm getting to that. One of the main reasons that the DX7 is so groundbreaking is because of the type of synthesis that it introduced and popularised. The DX7 introduced a new synthesis technique called frequency modulation, or FM synthesis, which allowed for complex and evolving sound design that was previously unheard of in synthesizers. Frequency modulation, or FM synthesis, was first conceived by the brilliant engineer and mathematician John Chowning of Stanford University in the 1960s. Chowning was exploring ways to generate complex sounds using simple waveforms and discovered that modulating the frequency of one waveform with another could create rich and expressive timbres unlike anything heard before. In 1967, Chowning published a groundbreaking paper on FM synthesis, which laid the foundation for a whole new world of sound synthesis. But what is FM synthesis and how does it work? FM synthesis is a type of sound synthesis that involves modulating the frequency of one waveform, called the carrier waveform, with the frequency of another waveform, called the modulator waveform. This results in complex and evolving timbres that can be used to create wide ranges of sounds, from musical instruments to special effects. In FM synthesis, the modulator waveform controls the frequency of the carrier waveform. As the modulator waveform changes, it modulates the frequency of the carrier waveform up and down, which in turn affects the pitch and timbre of the resulting sound. The carrier waveform is typically a simple waveform, such as a sine wave, while the modulator waveform can be more complex, including various shapes such as sine waves, square waves, or sawtooth waves. The fundamental principle behind FM synthesis is that the frequency of the modulator waveform determines how much the frequency of the carrier waveform is modulated. Higher frequencies in the modulator waveform result in more complex and higher frequency modulations in the carrier waveform, while lower frequencies in the modulator waveform result in simpler and lower frequency modulations in the carrier waveform. The parameters that control FM synthesis include the frequency of the carrier waveform, the frequency and amplitude of the modulator waveform, and the modulation index, which determines the strength of the modulation. By adjusting these parameters, sound designers can create a wide variety of unique and expressive sounds with FM synthesis. With its complex menus and lack of conventional controls, few learned to program the DX7 in depth. However, that didn't stop its preset patches becoming some of the most widely used in the 1980s, such as its electric piano sound. In 1971, to demonstrate FM's commercial potential, Chowning used FM to emulate sounds such as organs and brass. Stanford patented the technology and hoped to license it, but was turned down by American companies including Hammond and Wurlitzer. Chowning felt their engineers were used to analog synthesis and did not understand the potential of FM, so he carried on approaching different companies. At the time, the Japanese company Yamaha were the world's largest manufacturer of musical instruments, but had little to no market share in the United States. One of their chief engineers visited Stanford, and according to Chowning, in 10 minutes he understood. Chowning is quoted as saying, "I guess Yamaha had already been working in the digital domain, so he knew exactly what I was saying." Yamaha licensed the technology for 1 year to determine its commercial viability, and in 1973 its organ division began developing a prototype FM monophonic synthesizer. In 1975, Yamaha negotiated exclusive rights for the technology. The Roland founder Ikutaro Kakashi was also interested in the technology, but met Chowning 6 months after Yamaha had agreed to the deal. Kakashi later said Yamaha were the natural partners in the venture, as they had the resources to make FM synthesis commercially viable. The first commercial FM synthesizer was the Yamaha GS1, released in 1980, which retailed for nearly $10,000 and was expensive to manufacture due to its integrated circuit chips, so sales weren't great. At the same time, Yamaha was developing the means to manufacture very large-scale integrated chips. These allowed the DX7 to use only 2 chips compared to the GS1's 50, resulting in the DX7 retailing for only $1,995. Making it more affordable to the public than the GS1, sales then skyrocketed and hence a new musical revolution was born. Yamaha also altered the implementation of the FM algorithms in the DX7 for efficiency and speed, producing a sampling rate higher than Stanford synthesizers. Chowning felt this produced a noticeable, brilliant sound. The DX7 was the first commercially successful digital synthesizer and remains one of the best-selling synthesizers in history. According to Dave Bristow, a British Yamaha keyboard consultant who, along with American engineer Gary Leuenberger, created the DX7's 128 factory presets and had hoped that the DX7 would sell more than 20,000 units within a year. Orders exceeded 150,000 and it had sold 200,000 units after 3 years. It was the first synthesizer to sell more than 100,000 units. Yamaha manufactured units on a scale that American competitors just simply could not match. By comparison, Moog sold 12,000 mini Moog synthesizers in 11 years and could not meet the demand. The FM patent was for years one of Stanford's highest earning, and Chowning received royalties for all of Yamaha's FM synthesizers. According to Dave Smith, founder of the synthesizer company Sequential Circuits, the synthesizer market was tiny in the late 70s. No one was selling 50,000 of any of these things. It wasn't until Yamaha's DX7 came out that a company had shipped 100,000 plus synths. Smith said that the DX7 sold well as it was reasonably priced, had keyboard expression and 16 voices, and importantly, it was better at emulating acoustic sounds than competing products. Chowning credited the success of the combination of his FM patent with Yamaha's chip technology. At the time of the release, the DX7 was one of the first digital synthesizers that most musicians had ever used. It was very different from the analog synthesizers that had dominated the market. According to Music Radar, its spiky and crystalline sounds made it the perfect antidote to a decade of analog waveforms. With complex submenus displayed on an LCD and no knobs and sliders to adjust the sound, many found the DX7 difficult to program. Music Radar described the interface as nearly impenetrable, with operators, algorithms and unusual envelopes accessed through tedious menus and diminutive displays. Rather than create their own sounds, most users just use the presets. So even though the DX7 was successful, if I could give any advice to Yamaha, don't make it hard. The rest of us aren't as smart as you. I do think models after it probably definitely made up for it, but overall, good job. However, even though it was hard to program, all was not lost there. A few musicians skilled at programming the DX7 found employment creating sounds for other acts. An engineer and musician named Brian Eno learned to program the DX7 in depth and used it to create ambient music on his 1983 album Apollo, Atmospheres and Soundtracks. He shared instructions for recreating his patches in a 1987 issue of Keyboard magazine, but still people couldn't quite grasp it. As a producer, Eno used the DX7 on records by U2 and Coldplay, but in later years the DX sounds came to be seen as dated and cliche, and interest in FM synthesis declined, with second-hand digital synthesizers selling for less than analog. But however, years later, FM came back strong, and the development of software synthesizers such as Native Instruments' FM8 led to a resurgence in the popularity of FM synthesis. So maybe to the masses it has sucked for a little while, but I see this as the synthesizer that's responsible for starting it all. And I, for one, see that as a beautiful thing. So ladies and gentlemen, if you found this video interesting, please do leave a like and a comment, and also hit the subscribe button. I appreciate every single one of them.